if the United States and EU can freeze and seize Russia's gold and dollar reserves, how safe is any country's wealth under the Western financial system? I'm going to start with you, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, it's obvious that other countries do not feel safe. That's why they're buying gold. And I think the rise in gold prices and central bank gold holdings uh, reflects sort of the inability so far of the global majority, China, Russia, other countries, to create an alternative vehicle for this, keeping their international savings in London or in New York, and in central bank assets loaned to the central banks of England and America by investing in U.S. Treasury securities under the dollar standard, investing in European currencies. When all of this can be grabbed, all of a sudden there's no safe holding for other countries to hold their international reserves. And in the past, they've held it in New York, partly in their gold in London, because that's where the foreign exchange markets were. And the purpose of holding international reserves since World War II has been to manage the exchange rate. So you can stabilize the exchange rate by borrowing and lending, and other countries, under the rules that the United States set up in 1944 that created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were linked all of this intervention in world currency markets to the dollar, because that was the market at that time. That was where they had to operate. Well, all of a sudden, this vestigial survival from 1945 is been rendered unsafe and hence obsolete. So you could say that the whole surge in gold prices means that countries are trying to find some way to avoid holding them in the form. And the risk is twofold. On the one hand, the EU is still discussing how to turn this 300 billion that it's confiscated from Russia, how to give it to the Ukraine's kleptocrats in payment for their selling their population as, in effect, the mercenary army to NATO. The money that America's given Ukraine isn't to Ukraine, it's not to the people, it's to the kleptocrats that have said, we are willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. We are willing to control the Ukraine, to try to drain Russia's resources by sending Ukrainians there. And if the Ukrainian army tries to flee and retreat, we're going to shoot them in the back. That's what the Azov battalion is for. So all of this money's gone not really to Ukraine, but to the Lvov group, the Azov battalion, to really the neo-Nazis who are in charge of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are hopeless to do anything. Well, the problem's not only, therefore, with foreign countries dealing with the central banks and the government of the United States. It's the whole international court system that is going to, according to the EU, we are going to make sure that we never have to pay this $300 billion, because we're going to ask for trillions of dollars of reparations for Russia defending its Russian-speaking population, Ukraine's Russian-speaking population in Luhansk and Donetsk and now Odessa, that have said we want to be part of Russia. And their defense is really an attack. We are allowed, we the West, are allowed to attack Ukraine, to announce that the Russian speakers are subhuman. We can break the rules of law by attacking consumer areas, civilian areas, not focus on military at all, but just try to destroy whatever is left for Russia to have. But then we're going to say that they are attacking us by fighting back. It's like Israel accusing Gaza of attacking Israel by fighting back against the 80-year war against against the Palestinians. And as long as you're having the Western financial system backed by a utterly as a judicial court system that, like the International Monetary Fund acts and EU act as an arm of NATO, the rest of the world is trying to break away. And the line of least resistance for now is to buy gold. Well, the problem with buying gold, of course, is it's not only in the past, countries would invest their foreign reserves in gold. Venezuela invested its reserves for gold, and it kept its reserves, as we've discussed before, in the Bank of London, so that it could use these reserves as collateral when it borrowed money to intervene in the foreign exchange market to try to stabilize its currency. That's why countries kept their gold in either London or New York, where the major international foreign exchange markets were. But now they can't do this anymore. The Bank of England grabbed Venezuela's gold, and it looks like the United States has grabbed Germany's gold. And Germany's an ally. A few years ago, Germany asked for its gold reserves to be returned from New York from the Fed in New York's basement to Germany for its central bank to hold itself. The United States said, well, this gold is very heavy. We're going to have to find airplanes for that. That's the last that in public we've heard. German reporters and journalists have been calling me to say, do you know anything about what's ever happened to this? They tell me that they've asked the German politicians about it. The politicians will not answer. Nobody can find out whether Germany's got any of its gold back. And the United States is still holding on to this gold and the rest of Europe's gold. So holding gold only makes sense if you hold it in your own central banks, where the only way that it can be grabbed is for NATO to invade your country, seize the government, and empty out your gold reserves and take it away, like they did in Libya and other Middle Eastern countries. So this is the problem that they're really dealing with. The gold problem is how are we going to move beyond gold isn't in an alternative. Well, the other line of least resistance that they've talked about is currency swaps. Well, we'll hold each other's currencies among the global majority. And well, the problem with holding your currencies are the currencies go up and down. And if you're a creditor nation, like the United States was to Europe and the world in 1945, and like China is today to many of the Belt and Road Initiative countries that it deals with, how are you going to deal with the fact that the currency you're holding is declining? Russia has accumulated enormous holdings of Indian rupees that have been declining in value. And in the last few days have seen the Trump administration go to Argentina, and they say, we know that you Australians have been dealing with China very heavily, and you have a currency swap, and you owe them a lot of money, but this $40 billion that we're giving you to support the peso long enough to get Milei reelected next week, in exchange for this, and are not pulling the plug on you, we want you to break all your relations to China, to not honor the currency swap, just to say, well, we're just not going to pay you, China. What are you going to do about it? So currency swaps themselves are not a solution. The only solution is, and the BRICS currency is no solution, because the BRICS, in order to create a common currency among BRICS countries, it has to be like the United States creating a central bank in which all of the American states and politicians are connected. For the EU, you had all of the countries had to create a political union, because if you have your own currency, who is going to get this currency? How will it be distributed? And how will various countries pay? Until you have a political union among all the BRICS countries, which is not on the horizon by any stretch of the imagination, you're going to have to go back and have the solution that John Maynard Keynes came up with in 1944 as an alternative to the US designs for an international monetary fund. You create a new central bank, collective central bank that will manage the credits and debts among its member countries in order to denominate their currency, their foreign exchange and currency swaps, to denominate these currency credits and debts in a common denominator based basically on the prices of their collective exports and price rate relationships with each other. That's the only logical solution. And I described the long debate over this in my book, Super Imperialism. It took a lot of political maneuvering just for Keynes to come up with that. And of course, the United States said, no, we don't want other countries to make any means of settlement among themselves. Any country's settlement with any other country has to go through Washington and the US dollar. And other countries, first of all, you had Britain surrendering to this, and the result was the loss of the British Empire and its currency reserves and its colonies and countries using the pound were all transferred to the United States by 1950, and the pound collapsed in value, and Britain began its long deindustrialization. Other countries, the rest of the European countries, once Britain had surrendered, well, there was nothing they could do but go along with it. Well, for the first time now, the world has gone back to 1944, 1945 to create a kind of mutual foreign bank relation to handle relations among currencies that is not run by NATO, the United States, and the Cold War. And that's where you can look at the more gold goes up, the more you realize the inability so far for the other countries of the world to address and solve this problem.
Richard, jump in.
Yeah, let me put this in a context, but also to scare you. The same logic that leads the Europeans to look gleefully at the 300 billion as a way to make it appear to their own people that the horrible mistake they made in going into a war like this, the enormous damage the war has done to their economy, to make it look as though they're making now somebody else pay, which is really what this is about. It's not enough money to change the basic layout of what's going on. It sounds like an awful lot, and it's a big chunk of money, but it is not adequate to alter the basic situation. Number two, let me scare you. China has 750, last time I looked, $750 billion worth of U.S. Treasury bills. What's to prevent the United States from telling them that these are now toilet paper? We are not going to pay you the interest, and we're not going to pay you the principal. And we're going to deal with the rest of the world henceforth. When we have to borrow for the American government, we will borrow from the rest of the world. End of conversation. Or we'll do it for half of the 750 billion. What's to prevent them? You know, this is crazy. Here's what we are watching. We are watching the end of the empire. These are the kinds of things that happen when the empire can no longer function. The United States is facing a fundamental contradiction. It cannot keep the world arrangements of the post-45 period and fight Russia and China and be involved in a war in Ukraine and be gearing up to take the oil away from Venezuela. It can't do it. That's the problem. It can't do it. It doesn't want to admit to doing it can't do it. So it's coming up with crazy stuff that makes no sense other than as the end of an empire. So one of them is we're going to take, by the way, they've already taken if I understand correctly, they've already taken the interest income from the 300 billion and used it for the Ukraine war. Clearly, that great move didn't change anything. And so now they want to take the principal. Of course they do. This is the same game. And what does it do? Everything that Michael just said and a dozen more things. Everybody is wondering where to keep their money now because the empire, the emperor, is not in a position to do it anymore. The United States had said to the world, you can keep your money here because we are the safest place for anyone to keep any kind of wealth. We are the ones who will tax it the least. We are the ones who will threaten it the least. We don't even have a socialist or communist party worthy of the name in terms of its political power, so you don't have to worry about that. We have a docile, unorganized labor force. We offer you wonderful conditions, so please take a good portion of your wealth and bring it here, which gives us yet more power of an empire to give you the guarantees. You are, in fact, by locating your wealth here, funding our ability to guarantee that wealth. Okay, that's what an empire is. That's what an empire does. That's what the British did in the previous century. And now it can't do it anymore. Let me give you what you wouldn't perhaps see as another sign. We are now executing people in boats on either side of the Western Hemisphere. We did it for a while in the Caribbean with the Venezuelans and the Caribbeans. And now I learned in the last 2 days, we've gone on the Pacific Ocean side and we've done it again. We don't arrest these people, no trial, no jury, no lawyers, no nothing. Summary execution in the name of what? Of a war on drugs. Friends, the United States has had an official war on drugs for at least the last 75 years. It proves unable to stop them. You can get all of these drugs anywhere in the United States, urban, rural, east, west, north, and south. We are not able to stop it. Killing people summarily is an absurd thing for the upholder of values of law and order, and, if I dare say so, a rules-based international order. What rule exactly is it? Killing people in boats? If you arrest a person for the drug trade inside the United States, you do not kill them. Even if they are found guilty, you don't kill them. We haven't killed anybody in the drug trade for that crime in anyone's memory. Okay, so these are signs of an empire that cannot function. Of course, people are running to gold. It's one of those things which, and I don't believe it's correct, but it's another matter, but it's a thing that people think is safer than those other alternatives. Well, what I hope people focus on is not whether it's safer or not. In my judgment, it isn't, but that we can disagree. The important thing is they are running away from what is now clearly, even though they dare not say so, a break in the behavior of an empire. For the Europeans, look, they've even had a debate among themselves about it. Their lawyers are telling them, you are taking an incredible step here. are you sure that it will not hurt Europe to have been the one to do it? Because wherever you're wealthy, if it's the Europeans that are doing it, then it's Europe you're going to be sure not to keep your wealth in. And this is something the Europeans, at a time when everyone admits their economies are in serious trouble, above all, the British, the French, and the Germans, and those are the major three in that part of the world. You really want to now damage your standing as a place to hold wealth, which is where wealth has been held disproportionately for the last 500 years? This is bizarre. This is the end of the Western Empire. Last point before you go back. Part of the reason the BRICS have not developed their own currency, their own ability, which, by the way, all of these developments will provoke them to do and to return to do sooner rather than later. Michael is right about that. But one of the reasons they haven't done it, we have to keep in mind, because these are important points going on in the debates inside China. The spectacular growth of China in the last 35 years was itself in part dependent on the empire of the dollar. It was within that context that the Chinese found a way to grow faster than the United States, to become the manufacturing core of the world economy. So they are rightly worried. Don't make the transition out before you are pretty damn clear that the benefits of doing so will outweigh the inevitable costs of not having what worked so well for you. There's a joke that goes around in China about, not cutting off from the United States while it is doing very useful things for the Chinese in having the SWIFT system, in having the dollar as the universal exchange, even to the diminished degree that is now the case. In other words, it's the old dialectic, and we should be careful not to get caught on either side. And let me explain very quickly, then I'll stop. On the side of the United States is the following argument. China is only a superpower because it brought in private capitalists 30 years ago. After Mao died and the end of the Cultural Revolution, you had a change, and in come foreign private capitalists, Japanese, European, American, and then the allowance for the Chinese themselves. So that's one side of the dialectic. That happened, no question, and that was very important to Chinese growth, no question. But at the same time, the Chinese government held on to the absolute dominant position in the Chinese economy. The government did, and the Communist Party within the government kept its power. And that is just as important a part of the growth and success of the Chinese economy. Otherwise, you can't explain why China did so much better than any other country in the global South under the regime of American empire. All right, so the dialectic is the interplay between the public and the private sector. The reason they outperform the United States is the United States doesn't understand the dialectic and is so caught up in its own ideology that it holds back the government from doing all kinds of things it needs the government to do. Chinese don't have that problem, and the Americans can't see it. So the dialectical process now has shifted. It's costing the West every day. The war in Ukraine is a wonderful metaphor, despite everything. Every escalation, including the new sanctions on oil companies announced over the last 24 hours. like the F-16, like the Abrams tank, like the various missiles, like the Patriot system, like the HIMARS, all of them, they didn't work. They didn't work. That's why you have the escalation at every step. And if I were a betting person, I'm not, but if I were, I'd bet that all of this stuff with sanctioning the oil companies, these are just ways for Mr. Trump to cut his losses. Ukraine is going down, and there already is, an enormous blame game going on between Europeans and Americans. Who's at fault? And so, yeah, sure, let's sanction that. Let's show the United States did its part. It's not us. We did our part. It's you Europeans. And the Europeans will say exactly the opposite. And this game of blame will be yet another sign of an empire dissolving.